All right, I think we're live. I have never done the live deal before, so I think the strategy is maybe wait for some people to come in and then start interacting. Let's see here. All right, we got somebody in here. All right, so right now I am crappie fishing. Got my panfish set up. I got a small little tungsten spinning in circles. That's probably good, right? Fish like when stuff spins. Tipped with a waxy, and I'm just fishing up in shallow water right now. It's evening. Oh, here comes the comments. People are showing up here. Awesome. No, I am not on Gull Lake. Although, with that being said, I have wanted to go chase down some Gull Lake panfish. I was talking with my good buddy Brett, and sorry if I'm looking off screen. I'm watching the underwater camera. And we've talked about chasing down some panfish on Gull Lake specifically. So that's about all I can say about that right now. Not Hubert either. So I'm not in North Dakota. So here's what's going on. Right now it is whatever day it is today. I've definitely lost track. And I just got back from North Dakota. It was late last night. And now I'm back in Minnesota, Brainerd area. And yeah, it was a fun trip in North Dakota. But now, basically, I have one more video that's coming out from that North Dakota trip, and then yeah, we're gonna be fishing through the holiday season here into New Year's. I think this 30-day challenge or series, whatever you want to call it, is gonna be ending right around New Year. I haven't exactly lined up all the days, but I'm fishing in Minnesota right now. I've got one more video coming out from North Dakota, and that's actually going to come out tomorrow. So these 2 days kind of got flip-flopped, but it's actually fishing with my wife. So it's going to be the best video yet because she's in the whole thing. So I figured it would be interesting to do a Facebook Live right now, and the main reason why is because my GoPro actually fell into the ice. And I say Facebook Live, I meant YouTube Live. My GoPro fell into the water, and so I think everything is fine because it looks like it's running good and whatnot. But just to be safe, in case all that footage is totally fried, I thought it would be better to hop on a live here and do some chatting and hanging out. And, you know, if I went and plugged that SD card into my computer and everything was totally fried, well, then I wouldn't have any footage for you guys from today's fishing action. So for now, I'm just going to jig, answer some questions, and this will be the video for the day. So I kind of like this idea. I think it's sort of fun, but yeah, drop some questions down below in the comments or the live comments, or when it's live, is the comments down below or is it to the side, or I don't know. Regardless, drop some comments and I'll answer them here live. I think this will be a fun way to do it. And bonus points if I can actually get some crappies to come in and bite. They were definitely coming through earlier, but I haven't seen anything for a little bit now, so I can't promise you that we're going to catch something, but I can promise you that I will be jigging for them. So there's definitely a chance we could catch something anyway. So I will just wait a second here and wait for some of the comments to come in. And I think this might be a little awkward, but I think I can scroll like this and go through and look at the comments here. Alright, so I asked you guys asked if I was still in North Dakota. Not in North Dakota anymore. It was actually a pretty cool trip. I've never done the whole slough fishing for perch thing, and that was a really cool experience. And it's sort of interesting how those fish are just so they just grow so quickly, and it's such a prolific fertile fisheries that super fun and different, and the Dakotas, fishing in the Dakotas is definitely fishing in Minnesota, better than fishing in Minnesota. So let's see. Okay, so someone asked what rod I was using for perch fishing, and perch are sort of like this awkward in-between species where you could definitely catch them on something like this. This is a tuned up bullwhip, but it's actually just more of a slightly heavier panfish rod. Like I would potentially use this for like hard baits or like really big tungsten jigs, stuff like that. But it's almost a little bit light if you're chasing giant perch. That being said, you could definitely use this for perch fishing. But basically what I was using in that last video was just like a lighter weight walleye rod. And for me, that ends up being a little bit better when you're using like little spoons and stuff. And yeah, so that's what I was using specifically. I want to say it was a tuned up Precision, I believe was the exact rod I was using. I think it's a 32-inch option. Let's see. Alright, so Michael asked if I was rocking the Mega Live. Yes, I have been rocking the Mega Live. It's something that I wanted to try out this year because obviously, like I have Humminbird units. I know a lot of you probably have Humminbird units, and to get live technology the last few years, I mean, it's taken Humminbird a little bit to get live technology out onto the market, and so it was something that I wanted to try because I knew a lot of people would be interested in potentially getting live now that Humminbird is offering it. And the reason why is because a lot of people, especially in kind of the walleye belt, they use Humminbird units, so it's kind of like a nice bonus to not have to buy new units specifically. So I have just a Helix unit connected to the Mega Live, and it's worked good. I've been super impressed. So I have used LiveScope a little bit in the past. Specifically, you know, I have friends who have it, and I've tinkered with it, and I think it's really comparable. I think in some situations, I think specifically the clarity is really impressive, so there's a lot less interference and stuff on the screen in a lot of situations. I think forward viewing, you get a little bit more of that bounce back in shallow water. Like you probably, let's see, the video coming out tomorrow, you'll see I've got it pointed sideways so I could get two baits on the screen at one time, and you've kind of got that ring where it sort of hits the bottom. It's hard to explain, but it hits the bottom coming down and then creates a ring, and that's a little bit of an unfortunate situation, but it creates kind of like a little bit of, I don't know if you'd call it interference, but all in all, I guess what I'm getting at is I think the Mega Live is super clear, and it seems like the definition is pretty good too. So I'm pretty impressed with it. I also like that there's no black boxes as well. The black box can be kind of a pain in the butt and really heavy, and hooking it up can be a pain and getting it all rigged. So it's kind of nice for ice fishing to not have the added weight of a black box. So definitely, I wanted to try Mega Live this year and see how I liked it, and so far I'm a fan. Dilly said he'd like to see me do a collaboration with Sobe. Sobe's one of the nicest guys that I know. He is a real champ, and you know, very sincere. So I'd love to fish with him sometime. I still haven't fished with him. I've talked to him plenty, but okay. So Michael asked if I saw my GoPro fall down the hole on my graph, and no, I didn't, because it was actually, here it is, connected to a cord. So connected to this battery right here. So it actually slipped and fell into the hole, and it didn't fall all the way down to the bottom, and it was running when I pulled it back up. So should be okay. But I also know this little situation that I got right here is not a waterproof situation. This goes into kind of like This is where the memory card and the battery is. So I wouldn't think that this whole system would be waterproof. So I'm a little suspect, especially because the memory card is inside that little cartridge. So luckily I didn't have to fish it out from the bottom, because right now we're in the weeds and that would really suck to try and get that out of the weeds. Let's see. Okay, Liam asked what rod I was using on yesterday's video. And yesterday's video, was that the, oh, that was walleye fishing video. Okay, that was the tuned up commander rod. So, oops. All right, we got a fish. I was not paying attention at all. There we go, the crappie on the live. How do you like that? That's so cool. It's not a bad one either. Live videos are so much better when people are actually catching fish, right? Here we go. Beautiful, whoops. Beautiful, beautiful crappie. Put him back in the hole because I don't want to deal with cutting up fish tonight. If I cut up fish every single night that I caught fish on this series, man, I probably would have gained 5 pounds. Or 10, or I don't know. Well, with how many fish I've caught, probably 2 pounds. So let's see here. Get this all figured out. All right. Back in business. Talked about this in an earlier video, but straighten out your knot is helpful. I'm pulling the line back towards the tail end of the jig there, so that helps keep it straight. But when you're talking about knots, you definitely want a Palomar knot, because that'll hold that knot a little bit better from falling. Just give me a second to get resituated here. And I'm actually going to save that clip. Maybe I'll show it to you guys later. But that was probably on the underwater camera. There's probably a good strike there. But yeah, we were talking about walleye rods while I'm catching a crappie. And yeah, that's the tune-up Commander 38-inch model. And I've used quite a few different heavier duty walleye rods, and I'm a fan of that one specifically because I think it has a nice fast action, which I think is just good for a lot of different things. It helps you have better control over the bait. Ed asked, how do you decide where you're going to set up on a lake? And the simple answer to that is just, where are all the other houses? I'm just kidding. Where I decide, where do I set up? I guess it depends on the type of lake you're fishing. Ideally, what you'd like to do is you'd like to do a lot of hole hopping and trying to find specifically what you're looking for. So if you're fishing for deep walleyes, what I'm looking for is bait fish, and if I happen to mark a walleye while I'm hole hopping looking around, that would be really key. But it depends on like the time of the day and the weather, and if it's kind of midday and I'm chasing walleyes, I like to set up on basically breaks that go down into deeper water. So if you have like a flat that drops down into 20 feet, if it's kind of daytime, I might set up more towards the bottom of that break. But you want to try different things. So you want to look for like tapering flats. Those can be really good for fish moving up and down from deep to shallow water. It can be like a good highway. And yeah, but you never know on any particular day. It's worth looking at different types of things. Like if I'm going out walleye fishing, I might check breaks that have a tapering flat, and then I'll check breaks that are sharp. And just depending on what the fish are doing on that type of body of water, you might get different sort of spots that end up working better. And with panfish, this time of year, I love to fish in the weeds. And this time of year specifically, good green weeds are just golden. And with that being said, there's a lot of different stuff that can be hanging out in the weeds, including walleyes. And I don't catch a ton of walleyes up in the weeds, But panfish, pike, bass, and basically what I'm looking for is weeds that are good, green, and somewhat thick. Ideally, I want there to be a good amount of standing weeds and, you know, some combination of weeds that might be laying down or standing, but standing weeds can be really, really good. Cabbage is good. And so basically it's experimentation. If I'm up in the weeds, I'll take like an underwater camera and I'll just look at the weeds and see what they look like. And if I'm fishing in deep water, then I'll use something like a standard flasher or the Mega Live situation and kind of scan around, fish an area for a little bit. It's kind of nice with the live because basically if I'm fishing in deeper water, I'm just looking to see if there's fish in the area specifically. And when you have that big giant wide cone area, then you're going to see fish that are not only directly underneath you like you'll see on a normal sonar, but you'll also see fish that just happen to be swimming around on that side or on that side. And yeah, that's, I guess, I feel like I'm droning on and on, but the short answer is when I'm fishing for walleyes, I like to find bait, I like to see fish. I'm fishing on sharper breaks, I'm looking around, I'm looking at points, I'm looking at inside corners, I'm looking at sharp breaks, I'm looking at tapering flats. During the evening, I'll slide up higher up onto those flats in shallower water because sometimes the fish will come up and feed. But then when I'm chasing panfish, I'm mostly looking for habitat. If I'm fishing for basing crappies, then I'm going to be looking for fish specifically. And I'm going to, you know, punch a bunch of different holes and look around until you find those fish stacked up. But yeah, that's kind of a difficult question, and I probably could have answered that in a little bit of an easier, more timely manner. If the bluegills aren't biting in shallow weeds, where should I fish for them? So that's kind of an interesting question because sometimes bluegills won't bite at certain times of the day. So depending on the lake, if it's a dirtier lake, you're more likely to have that daytime bite. But if it's a clear body of water, which is what I am fishing more often than not, then sometimes you might mark, you know, you might mark like 0 fish all day, but you might mark some fish during the day, and then in the evening, all those fish that you're marking are going to be biters. So sometimes it's more of a timing thing than actually a location thing. But with that being said, if the fish aren't biting, I would just go look somewhere else, and specifically bluegills in the weeds, like, that's awesome, but sometimes there's bluegills in the basin too, depending on where you're fishing, and sometimes maybe those fish are going to be more willing to bite during the day. But I think more often than not, if fish aren't biting, it's a timing thing and not as much of a location thing. I think it's really good if you can find the fish, ID where they're going to be, and then once it's like 4 o'clock, 4:30, and that sun is starting to go down, that's when they're going to bite. And that's when, on some days, it's like you'll get out there and you'll just be looking around, trying to find fish, and just waiting and biding your time and trying to find the best school of fish in time for that evening bite to happen. Hopefully that makes sense. Do you ever fish the ice fishing extravaganza? I fished it one time when I was a child. I generally prefer not to fish around other people, so it's kind of hard to get away from the crowds with that one. But I think I'll probably go to it more in the future. I don't know. It's a cool event, and it's for a good cause, and I should be maybe involved with it and fish it just for the fun of it. But it's also kind of like a lot of craziness, and I haven't gone there for years and years. Any future plans to come to western North Dakota, specifically the western part of Sakakawea? We have really good walleye bite right now. Sakakawea is like totally 100% on my bucket list. Need to get to Sakakawea at some point before I die. And the main reason I want to go to Sakakawea is to catch big pike, which I know you guys got over there. So Sakakawea is on the list. I'd like to get there eventually, but it's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna happen like in the near future. So what's the deepest that you'll chance a clean release without the fear of fish still dying, so delayed mortality? 10 or 20 more or less. So it's going to depend on the species a little bit. If I'm fishing for walleyes, I will release a walleye at, I don't know, like 30 feet or so, I think is acceptable. And if it's panfish, they can be a little bit less hardy, and I will chance releasing a panfish in like 20 some, like low 20s probably. And there's people who know a lot more on that subject than I do, so I wouldn't take that as gospel or anything. But what I would definitely suggest is going into the scientific literature and checking that out, because scientists have done studies on this in the past. So they're going to know a little bit more than I do. And I've had people message me about using descent devices, and I think that's worth looking into too. I don't really know a ton about all that stuff. I do know that my grandfather, before he passed, which was, when was that? It was a little over a year ago. That was like one of his like pet obsessions in the last 6 months or so before he died, and that was descent devices. He had done a lot of research on it and was pretty sold on the potential of them being good and useful for releasing fish out of deep water. So with that being said, I haven't really looked into it. So those are kind of the numbers that I usually run. With that being said, what are you using for editing, and how much time are you spending each day to edit these daily videos? Okay, so that's an interesting question. So I've been working with a buddy of mine. His name is Joel, and Joel has been doing most of the editing for me, and it's still kind of been a pain in the butt to try and get the footage over to him, because I'm trying to get 50 gigabytes of footage sent over, you know, a state away. He lives down in Iowa, and he's been really awesome. He's been super reliable, works super hard. And so he's been helping me a lot and doing a lot of the edits, and we've done 18, 19, I can't remember, my brain is mush at this point, but we've done many videos, and I'm trying to remember how many that I've edited myself. I've edited a handful of them, but even without me having to edit them, it's like a lot of logistics, trying to get all that media sorted out, dumped, and figured out. And I definitely would not be able to do it without Joel helping me out. So I think it's been taking anywhere from like 2.5 hours for like a really fast one. And that's like sometimes when I'm editing them, they can be a little bit faster because I was there, like I know what happened, and I don't have to sort through the footage as much as he does, because I can remember what happened on that particular day. So I can actually knock out some of these videos in 2.5 hours. And then that being said, when there's more footage and maybe there's some like underwater camera footage to try and sort through, sometimes just depending on what the content is and how long it's going to be, it could take up to 8 hours or more. Maybe Joel can jump in the comment section and give you a more accurate number, but it's going to be, it's several hours. So if you're thinking like going out and fishing every single day, trying to stay on top of bites, which is not easy. That might be the hardest part, I'm not sure. So trying to stay on top of fish, catch fish in every video if you can, and then taking all that footage, dumping it, and then there's anywhere from like 2 to 8 hours of editing the video, picking the thumbnail, writing descriptions, and I guess sharing it. I haven't done a super good job of sharing these videos. It's like a really pretty serious undertaking, so it's a little bit of a grind. It's really fun to get to fish all the time like this, and that's really been nice, and I'd like to fish more in the future like this. But yeah, it's been quite an undertaking. So just sneaking a peek through some of these comments now. someone asked if I had any tips or tricks on the Helix series. So specifically like traditional flashers is what this advice would be for. And I've been meaning to make some content around traditional flashers. The reason why I've been using Mega Live so much is because I feel like it's such a cool viewing experience, and you just get to see so much as a viewer watching the video. So that's the main reason. It's a little bit heavier, it's a little bit bulkier, so it's kind of a pain in the butt from that standpoint, but you can also really learn a lot from lugging that big giant hunk of technology with you. But some tips for using a traditional flasher. Tip number 1, always be messing around with your settings. There are no magical settings. Like I see people in the comment section all the time, like different comment sections of different videos, like, wow, that looks great, my flasher doesn't look like that. And then they'll of course ask, what are your settings? And the thing about settings is settings are going to be variable based on where you're fishing. So if you're fishing in deep water, it's going to be, you're going to want to set your settings way different. So let's say deep soft bottom area, you're going to want your settings way different than when you're up in the shallows. So constantly experimenting with your sensitivity is really important. So sensitivity is a big one. What else is important? I would say that's the biggest one, because people are always just looking for kind of your magical answer to all your problems. And there are no magical settings. You need to be experimenting. You can experiment with color palette. You can be experimenting with oh, here's another good one. So sometimes when you're like fishing in deeper water, it can be really hard to see your little bait on the bottom, and utilizing zoom is extremely critical, because sometimes it can be hard to see a fish coming up off the bottom. When you're fishing during the winter time period, those fish are just, you know, I've looked on like live viewing sonar during the summer and scanned around and looked for fish. It can be really fun during the summertime with walleyes, and you'll see fish like this far off the bottom all over the place, and you can't even scan around and look for walleyes with live when you're fishing during the winter, because their bellies are just right up on the bottom. So when you're using a normal flasher, you need to have that bottom zoomed in as much as you can stand, because you need to see if the bottom begins to come up just a little bit. That's really critical, so I would definitely recommend taking advantage of the zoom feature. How many amp hours have you been using on your live setup? So I've been using 20 amp hour battery, and it's a lithium battery, and it's been lasting quite a while. It's definitely lasted like for all day fishing situations. There's been times where I used it one day and then forgot to plug it in, and then it was dead at like 10 a.m. or something, and I'm like, oh shoot, this is really bad. And I've had to change out batteries and whatnot. But in my experience, it seems like it's been working for the all-day fishing situation. So yeah, I guess long story short, I don't actually know how long it's been going, because it's never really died on me during the day. And I've kind of, you know, where you count out the hours, like, oh, okay, so we started at X time and we ended, and it just died right now, so that's been this many hours. So it's not one of those deals where you got to crank the light down as much as you can to save battery for as long as you can, because battery has not been an issue. Now, I'm sorry my answers are a little bit long-winded. I feel like I'm probably way behind on the comment section, but I don't want to scroll down and see how many questions there are, because I don't want to lose my spot, so I'm just kind of going down the line here. Do I have any interest in sturgeon fishing through the ice? Yes, I definitely want to do that one day. Yeah, I don't, you know, I know people do it kind of down in southern Minnesota and over by Wisconsin, and then I have heard that people do it up on the Rainy River as well. So I would love to do it in either of those places, or wherever else people do it. But sturgeon through the ice is definitely 100% on my bucket list. Like, I want to do that so bad. Alright, somebody said my GoPro might be okay if I dry it out. I think it's going to be fine. I'm actually feeling kind of confident. I just really don't want to lose the footage today and not have a video for you tomorrow. So, okay, what is the deepest I've ever ice fished? The deepest I've ever ice fished is probably like 100 feet. And the reason why you would ever fish that deep is because the fish are using that water. So when I say fished in 100 feet, I don't mean my jig is in 100 feet of water. I mean I'm fishing over 100 feet of water. And I feel like there's only a few situations where you would ever want to or need to do that. And one of those situations is when you are fishing for lake trout, and whitefish is another option. But basically, you're fishing for fish that are suspended adjacent to shallower humps. And when I say shallower, that might mean a 50-foot hump or a 30-foot hump or 70-foot point or whatever it is. Basically, these fish are kind of like swimming around looking for meals, and you know, they might be up near the bottom, they might be up near the top, halfway down they might be at the bottom. But that's the deepest I've ever fished, and it's not necessarily fishing on the bottom. I know that those Green Bay guys fish for whitefish down at the bottom, and I honestly am not sure how deep that is down there. 80 feet, 90 feet. Maybe you guys can help me out on that one, but I know that they fish in extremely deep water for whitefish out there, where they're actually jigging right on the bottom. Fishing more. Murray, he asked me if I was catching any fish. Well, caught one fish so far, or one fish so far in this video. There was some fish catching action earlier, but now it's been quiet. I've kind of been sneaking a peek down at the underwater camera and not seeing a lot. There's a lot of bugs down there. Turns out the bugs come out at night. Inline versus spinning reels for hole hopping with longer rods. Okay, so that's an interesting question. For me, I think a lot of people would answer that by saying it depends on how deep you're fishing, and they would preface that by saying like, hey, if you're fishing in really deep water, you don't want to be using an inline reel. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't mind using an inline reel in deeper water. For me, it depends more on the type of bait you're using. So this is like a small little tungsten jig right there. You can see I've got some line twist in this line. I think I got to pull off a little bit. Well, okay, so that's actually a good example. So spinning reels, line twist is a way bigger issue. So normally when I am using small little tungsten baits, I'm using an inline reel because I'm trying to eliminate line twist. Because spinning reels, you know, as you can see, like when the line goes on a spinning reel, it's just twisting up, and it's just a really bad recipe for line twist. So typically I'm going to be using an inline reel for tungsten bait, and the reason why I'm using a spinning reel right now is because I'm fishing with an underwater camera, and I can see if my bait is spinning around while I'm jigging it, and I can jig it with I can use a cadence of jigging to avoid that spin, and I can kind of read the mood of the fish and watch them and try and kind of be jigging it in such a way that it's going to have the back end of the bait towards the fish, so when they bite it, I actually get hook and not the head of the jig. So where the heck was I going with that? Oh yeah, so I'm generally trying to avoid line twist when I'm using inline reels, but with that being said, like with this underwater camera situation, oh, that's a cool looking bug. Sorry, squirrel. With this underwater camera fishing situation, I like to use a spinning reel just because there's less messes. So inline reels they can be sort of a delicate situation where you know, if you're not being super anal about how you're managing your line and making sure it's not getting hung up on anything, basically, long story short, you can have a lot of problems with inline reels. So spinning reels can be great for that situation, but when I'm using spinning reels more often is when I'm using bigger baits. So that might be spoons, I'm fishing for walleyes, for example, walleyes exclusively with spinning reels. So yeah, but even when I'm fishing with panfish, if I'm using like spoons or rattle baits or anything like that, vibrating hard baits, then I will use a spinning reel. And usually when I'm hole hopping with just like a traditional sonar or like a Mega Live or something like that, I'll use an inline reel with my smaller tungstens. Sorry, looking through some more comments again. Do I ever fish western Wisconsin? I don't spend really any time over there, unfortunately. I do know that there is some good fishing. Okay, so Smackdown Outdoors said 20 feet max with panfish. I would tend to agree with that. I think that's a fairly acceptable range there. And he also said over 30 feet is tough for walleyes. So we're kind of on the same page with safe release, with avoiding mortality for some of these fish. Somebody's leaving a bunch of emojis. Someone caught a 17-inch crappie. That seems pretty good. That's a large one. Okay, so Caleb asked where I'm fishing right now, and I am hesitant to give out a specific lake, but I am in the Brainerd Lakes area right now, which you probably, I don't know if you heard that or not, but a four-wheeler just ripped by, and there's a lot of fishing pressure in the Brainerd Lakes area. There's a lot of people here, kind of, and a lot of those people like to fish. So, unfortunately, it's hard to get away from people sometimes. But yeah, I'm in Brainerd right now. I just got back from the Dakotas. Dakota's awesome. There's a lot of fish there. They grow extremely fast. That Devil's Lake area is so cool because like people are there for fishing, right? It's like definitely a super fishy town. So you go to the restaurant after a day of fishing and you can talk fishing with people, and yeah, it's a cool area. Minnesota's kind of cool too, and it's just harder to find those gems in Minnesota. All right, so Mav asked, how do I become a better fisherman? I think the best answer to that is you got to spend less time camping and more time fishing. I'm just kidding. So Mav is he makes very popular truck camping and other sort of camping videos, and actually he just made a video on camping in his flip over shack. If I looked at the thumbnail and I saved it. I put it in my watch later list because I kind of like ice camping videos. I think a lot of you guys probably like ice camping videos too, and it seems like they're pretty popular. I like to ice camp as well. It's kind of a lot of work, and with that being said, I think I might do a little bit of camping here at the end of this 30-day series. But the last time I watched one of Mav's camping videos that was on the ice specifically, he was sleeping in the flip over shack, and I've never done that. I've always slept in the hub houses like this, which is cool. Like there's a lot of room in here, and I'm super impressed that Matt was able to pull it off in a flip over. So that's something I might have to try one day, possibly, but also like might as well just do it in a hub house if you can. Okay, what's the I think they're asking what's the water clarity here. The answer is very clear. It's very clear water clarity. Scrolling through the questions here. Yeah, so we got some more comments here about camping. The place that I've camped the most was out on Mille Lacs Lake. Mille Lacs is super fun, and for me, okay, so there's a lot of lakes that kind of have different bites, and the biggest key when you're choosing lakes, choosing the best lake to spend the night out on, whether you're in a hub house like this or you're just in, a super fancy $40,000 fish house, whatever suits your fancy. The biggest key when you're choosing lakes is choosing lakes that have good night bites, or I guess maybe choosing lakes that don't have good night bites if you actually want to sleep at night. Because sometimes if you pick a lake that has a really good night bite, those rattle reels will just be ringing, ringing. It was really awkward me trying to make the ring noise. It'll be ringing all night, which can actually be a pain in the butt if you actually want to get some decent sleep. So, but Mille Lacs is a cool lake because I feel like you can catch walleyes all night on Mille Lacs. And that's probably the reason why there's like 1,000 fish houses on the lake once we get to January or so. Luckily, it's kind of been like a slow ice making year. So I shouldn't say luckily because it took me a million years to finally get out on Mille Lacs. And the reason why I like Mille Lacs so much is, well, it's really good fishing, but it's also right there in my backyard. So I lived in Brainerd and we just sold our house. And now where I live, I'm like 15 minutes from Mille Lacs, which is really cool because now I'm 15 minutes closer to my favorite lake. But anyway, I know that some guys are itching to get their ice houses out on Mille Lacs, so that'll be cool. That'll be nice. I'm definitely going to be doing a I say definitely. I will probably be doing a video sleeping out on Mille Lacs in my hub house possibly, but my buddy Brad Hawthorne with his Ice Camp Outfitters has a lot of cool houses, and I think he's gonna let me sleep in one. So I might take the family out there. All right, so Mav asked about lake trout mortality, especially on inland lakes. And when we're talking about inland lakes, I mean, that's kind of all I've ever caught them in. I would assume non-inland lakes would mean like Lake Superior or something like that. But for the most part, lake trout are going to be able to belch up the oxygen and won't suffer barotrauma as a result. As you're pulling them up and, you know, the pressure changes and the air bladder expands, they're able to belch up that oxygen that's in their air bladder, or the air that's in their bladder. And so there's generally not an issue with delayed mortality or barotrauma when it comes to lake trout. That being said, you know, if you catch a fish, and so basically when you're fighting the fish, you'll look down in the hole and you'll see that there's a bunch of bubbles in the hole, and that would be an indication that that fish is belching and releasing all that air. But if you don't see any oxygen or any air bubbles coming up into your hole, then that's probably not a great sign. That means it's not really successfully belching up that air. So I should probably stop using the word belch because it's kind of a disgusting word. So what I would do, if you're worried about mortality, I would play the fish out a little bit, and I wouldn't try and, like, if it's a small fish and you horse it up fast and you don't give it a chance to belch, that could potentially be an issue. And also, if the fish looks like it's blown up, you potentially may be able to massage some of that oxygen out of the air bladder to help with the pressure change. But no matter what you do, just getting it back fast is going to be huge. But for the most part, fishing for lake trout in deep water is not going to be an issue. Just try not to horse them up. That would be my personal opinion. And like the horsing them up thing, don't horse them up and they won't die. When you're talking about other species of fish, like, that's just not going to be true. They've done studies on it, and you know, it's like, oh, I just reel them up slow and there's no issue. Like their air bladder isn't sticking out of their mouth, so we're good. But no, that's definitely not the case. So yes, if you reel the fish in really slow, they will not suffer barotrauma. But how slow you need to reel them in is way slower than you think it is. So I even hesitate to say exact numbers because there's studies on this and I don't remember the numbers. But basically what you're looking at is like, oh, if you caught a fish in 50 feet of water, you would have to reel it in over the next 45 minutes for them to not suffer barotrauma. So you're not helping that much by reeling them in slowly. I mean, if you just absolutely fire them up, that probably doesn't help. but I don't think you can really slow down enough if you're fishing in super deep water. Peeking through the questions here. I'm not just awkwardly staring you guys down. Alright, so Fishing More just asked Murray, or said that they should go sturgeon fishing, and I think you guys should invite me. Sorry guys, I'm a really slow reader. It takes me a while to get through some of these questions. Some people can read questions and talk at the same time, and that's not one of my my gifts. Okay, so Brian asked if I was a part of the Fishing Minnesota Facebook group, and the answer is yes. I do see those posts sometimes. It's not a group that I'm like scouring and looking at all the time and answering questions and hanging out in, but I am a part of it technically. I'm one of the members, and yeah, it's there's like, it's crazy. So Facebook, social media, YouTube, all the things, and even TV shows. Even it's been wild how social media has just helped like spread the word about fishing, and also like specific bites, which, I mean, you guys can have your own opinions, I guess, if that's good or bad, but it's interesting how information spreads a lot faster, and when someone's catching fish in a certain spot, like, a bunch of people find out about it pretty quick because maybe there was something in the background. So if you want to keep your favorite fishing spot secret, I would definitely recommend either taking the photo inside of the fish house, or with the fish house right behind you, or maybe like angle the camera up a little bit so that people don't see the background. But yeah, that can be one of the big issues with social media, and Facebook groups are kind of like a big part of that. But there's also a lot of really good information that you can get in these groups as well. So there's plenty of people that are willing to share stuff and, you know, share tips that will help you catch fish. Or maybe if you're having problems with your gear, like, they'll tell you how they were able to fix it. And it's interesting. I haven't really like paid attention to fishing clubs and stuff like that. People that kind of meet in person and talk about fishing and help each other out. I think fishing clubs are really awesome, and there's been a lot of people who have been brought into the sport and nurtured through these fishing clubs. And I don't know how they're doing anymore, but it seems like Facebook groups have kind of, if I were guessing, I would imagine that they probably are kind of whittling away at fishing clubs, or, you know, I don't know if younger people are joining fishing clubs or not, but there's a lot of good information you can get on Facebook groups. And I guess, long story short, you know, that Fishing Minnesota group is a good group where you might be able to get some good information if you are helpful and ask questions and add to the community. I don't think I'm going to answer that next question. Sorry, Mav. Oh no. There's retracted comments in the comments section. Okay, so Tom said that I should finish my 30-day fishing challenge or series, or is challenge too cheesy of a way to call it? Like, 30-day challenge. So I've been going with series. I think that might be better. I'm not sure. And so, sorry, I forgot what I was even going to say. So Tom suggested that I wrap the 30-day series up in Milwaukee, chasing mega downtown browns. And I think that sounds super awesome. But I also think that by the time I wrap up this 30-day series, it's going to be like roughly New Year's or something. And I don't think that they'll have fishable ice in Milwaukee at that point. I could be wrong. So I've been to Milwaukee a couple times for that brown bite, and that is like the coolest thing ever because you set up your hub house, you set up because I think you get 3 rods per person. You set up the automatic fisherman or the jaw jackers or whatever you're using, and basically you just sit around, hang out with buddies. You could be in the hub house if it's really cold out. If it's really nice out, you just hang out outside. But you're just hanging out with buddies, sitting on buckets, talking, and then all of a sudden you're kind of looking around and you see one of the jaw jackers or the rod is just bent over because it's the automatic hook setting devices or whatever, and it's the coolest bite. Like it's one of my favorite bites because it's so relaxing and you're not like hole hopping and moving, and you just kind of set up camp and you're sort of trying to muscle other people out of your area because whatever, like these harbor areas are really small and a lot of people want to go fish in it, so it can be a little bit crowded, but you're trying to get a nice big spread, and then every once in a while you have some guy who goes over and he sets up a tip up right in the middle of your spread and you're like, what the heck, man, like there's actually a lot of area over there like on the other side, and well, whatever. I guess now I'm just complaining, but yeah, it's kind of cool. I love the automatic hook setting device thing. There's kind of like a stigma behind that where people are like, oh, what, now you need a device to set your hook for you, like how much more are you going to need, you got all this fancy electronics and you have things that are setting the hook for you, and this isn't even fishing anymore. But I would push back on that. I think some of this technology stuff is getting kind of crazy, and I'm like afraid to know what it's going to look like in 10 years and how it's all going to impact our fisheries over these next several years as more and more people get it. And I think regulations need to change in order to accommodate how technology is changing and how people can find fish a lot faster and easier. But where the heck was I going with it? Oh yeah, the automatic hook setting devices are a good thing. And the reason for that is because when you catch a fish and it grabs onto your bait, if you're using a tip up, they've got free slack and they can just chew on it. And, if you're not paying attention, there's a flag up and the fish was chewing on it for the last 2 or 3 minutes. All of a sudden, that fish just swallowed your bait and it's got hooks in its belly and it's a dead fish. If you're doing catch and release or you're trying to, select for a certain size of fish for harvesting, like that's really bad. You're just going to you can kill a lot of fish with tip ups potentially. But with automatic hook setting devices like the jaw jacker and the automatic fisherman, it's a good thing because I don't know that you're necessarily catching a lot more fish or less fish. I'm not sure depending on the species that you're chasing. But when the fish takes the bait and starts to swim away, it sets the hook, and it sets the hook right away. And basically what that means is it doesn't give the fish a chance to swallow it and just eat it too deep and then die. So I think it's a good thing for fisheries. I think it's really helpful and good for mortality. And when you're chasing trout, it's kind of a necessity to have that automatic hook setting device because if you have like a hook on a little minnow underneath a tip up, trout are like really sensitive. If they feel any resistance, they're going to drop that bait, and it's just really common for a fish to grab your minnow a trout to grab your minnow and then drop it before you get the chance to even go up and set the hook. So that's the reason why everybody uses those automatic hook setting devices when they're fishing for trout. But I think it's just a good thing in general, and I think it's really stupid that they're outlawed in like a lot of states. I think it's disappointing because they're actually a lot better for the health of the fish. And if there's anybody here who's watching that's in charge of making laws in states, I think you should definitely reconsider the ban on automatic hook setting devices because it helps with mortality. It's good for the fish, And if you know someone who's in charge of making these rules, you should let them know, because it's a silly law. Okay, let's see here. Sort of losing my voice a little bit, which is lovely, because I'm not planning on stopping talking like too soon here. Okay, if I could use one lure, ice fishing or open water, for the rest of my life, what would it be? If I needed something for both situations, I think, well, if it's ice fishing specifically, it would probably be like a really small, maybe like an 1/8 ounce buckshot spoon, probably some perchy kind of color, green or some fire tiger or something like that, or yellow or something kind of perchy generally. And I think that would be good for ice fishing, just because like you can catch crappies on it, you can catch walleyes on it, you can catch pike on it. It has rattles in it, so you can kind of attract fish to your hole, but it's also pretty slender and you can be sort of finessey with it, which is just good for getting bites even when the bite is kind of tough. So that would be my ice fishing choice. And open water, if I can only have one, it would probably be, it would probably be just a plain hook. No, I mean, that's going to be your best option, just live bait rigging all season long, or just a jig could be super good. So, yeah, what size? Maybe like a 1/4 ounce jig, so you could fish deep too if you wanted. Just a simple jig is kind of the deal. But I was also tempted to go with like a horizontal glide bait, or whatever that category of baits is called, which is like the puppet minnow, the jig and wrap, the hyper glide, the moonshine shiver melt. Like there's a million of them. One of those would be a good option too. But when the fish are not quite as aggressive, sometimes you can get a reaction strike with those glide baits, but sometimes they won't touch them too. So just live bait rigging or jigging is just, it gets bit all the time. Nothing beats a burger and a brew after a day of ice fishing. I 100% agree with that. Tend to be partial to burgers. Sometimes pizzas are nice too. Tungsten tubby. Yep, that's a good one. I've used that bait. I don't know a ton about the Fenwick rods, James. I've never used one. I've seen them, of course, but where am I fishing? Caleb asked. I'm fishing here in central Minnesota, Brainerd Lakes area, which is kind of, I guess you could call home for me. So Kipper asked about advice for going to fishing in Crane Lake, Minnesota, and I've never fished Crane Lake either. I know that it's a good lake. And he asked if I had any advice for fishing in really cold weather and on that specific lake. And I don't have the lake specific knowledge to help you out there, unfortunately. But when you are fishing in cold water, cold water. The water's always cold when you're ice fishing. When you are fishing in cold fronty kind of situations, I guess my only advice would be just to make sure that you always have a dead stick on. That can be super critical, because some days, especially when the bite is really tough, sometimes the only thing that's going to get them to bite is just a plain hook, or maybe a small treble hook with a minnow connected to it, and just swimming around, all natural as you can get. And sometimes that's the deal. So if the weather is super nasty and cold front conditions, just make sure you have a dead stick ready. Okay, so Jim asked how long I have been doing YouTube and fishing as an occupation. And that's kind of a long story. So the answer is a long time. But I've kind of done a lot of things in my somewhat short working lifetime. So I am, how old am I? 28? 28. And out of college, I went to go work with my dad. He makes television shows for Fishin. Some of you guys might know kind of my background, but uh, my dad makes television shows for Fishin, so I went to work with him and did some TV stuff, did some internet stuff, website stuff, uh, YouTube, social media, all the different things that you would do in the fishing media world. But I've been making YouTube videos specifically just a few years, a couple years. I haven't gone like super crazy with making, super consistent couple of videos a week kind of deal like some of the hardcore YouTubers, but I think I'm going to push a little bit harder to make more content in the future for you guys. And I really appreciate all the support that I've gotten during this 30 days of fishing. We're not through 30 yet, but we're gonna get through 30 by the end of the month. So one of the guys said, I've always thought about converting a slide-in camper for a pure winter fishing setup. And growing up, my next door neighbor, one of my good buddies, their names are Hunter and Gunner. So you would imagine that they're kind of outdoorsy. But yeah, one of them converted an old camper and used it as an ice house, and that was pretty cool. I think he ended up using it one season and then selling it, but it was pretty neat. I don't think it's a terrible idea. So Denny said most house rentals are day shacks only. Is there not much of a night bite in Minnesota? There is a lot of a night bite in Minnesota. So a lot of the lakes in Minnesota are really clear, and for that reason, the night bite can be very critical. So yes, and there are day shacks, but there's sleepers too. A lot of people have sleepers. My buddy Brad Hawthorne has, how long has he been doing it? Is this his second? This is either his second or third year doing sleepers out on Mille Lacs with like big fancy Yetis and all those deals and all the big, really expensive nice fish houses. And it's just been like wildly popular. I think there's an enormous demand for sleeping out on the ice if you have the cash or the equity to go and purchase fish houses and rent them out. And I don't know what that business model looks like or if what the margins are in it or whatever, but I guess long story short, yes, there's definitely night bites happening and there's people renting out sleepers for sure. Oh, my wife said there's chicken fajitas waiting for me at home, but I'm not coming home yet. Sorry, hon. Where am I fishing? In Minnesota, central Minnesota. What access do I prefer at Mille Lacs? So, generally, I like to go out of the Garrison public access because it's the very, very closest place that I can launch out of. I like to fish out of Miramar as well, up on the north end. So, Red Door, I think, yeah, that's where I would typically go and buy a pass to go out. So, those are kind of the main two spots, and then the public access down on the western side of the lake. Jim wants to know if he can have some of the fajitas, and so does Dylan. Sorry guys, these are my fajitas. I'm gonna be pretty hungry after this. I'm not seeing any water bottles either, and my voice is starting to go a little bit. What is my opinion on what is safe ice to camp overnight? So, that's an interesting question. I feel like more important than the amount of ice is just the weather that's coming through. If it's really windy or anything like that, it could be pretty dangerous, I guess. There was, I was out on 4 inches of ice roughly on Mille Lacs like maybe a week ago or something, just out of Garrison, the western side of the lake there, and there was a big wind show that came through and broke up the ice, and I had actually heard that there were some people that got stranded out on the ice while they were sleeping. And for me, if I'm fishing on like a bigger lake like that, oh, what would the number be? I feel like a good 8 inches or so is where I'm starting to feel a little bit more safe, but it's going to be weather dependent. If I know it's going to be really windy and potentially the ice might be moving around or cracking or breaking or anything like that, then I'll probably avoid sleeping out there, just to be completely real, until the whole lake like fully locks up, where you get to the point where there's you could like borderline drive like small vehicles out there. That's when I would start to feel safe, just kind of in any situation. But you don't want to go spend the night too early on big lakes specifically. Smaller lakes is okay because they're probably not going to break in half or anything at night. Okay, so Jim asked, what do you do when the bite just shuts off? The sun is going down, the bite is really good, then I get nothing. Is that just how it goes? It's how it goes in open water as well for him. So, yeah, sometimes that's just how it goes, at least in my experience. Bite windows are really, really key. And just capitalizing on when the fish are biting is extremely important. Some lakes have longer bite windows, some have shorter bite windows, and just being in the right spot when that window opens up is really key. So when I'm fishing during the day, sometimes, depending on the lake, some lakes have good day bites, but lakes that don't have good day bites, sometimes just if I'm marking fish, that's a good sign. That means I'm in a good area. And then when that key bite window starts up, you need to be in the right place so you can capitalize on it and catch as many fish as possible. The lake that I'm on right now is a great example of that. It's got that really good bite for like an hour as the sun is hitting the horizon, and then after that, it's just kind of over. And so right now it's over, and I think it's possible we could pick up some fish here and there. We caught one pretty early in this live session, but what the heck was I? Yeah, okay. So in some lakes, you'll have that key bite window at the end of the day, and sorry, my wife just texted me. It was distracting me. You'll have that bite window as the sun is going down, and sometimes if you just stick it out there, maybe that next bite window that comes up is going to be at like 11 p.m. or who knows, or 9 o'clock or whatever it is. Sometimes the fish will turn back on later in the nighttime. More often than not, I'm just leaving once the bite stops. Alex wants to know if I would do the 30 days fishing and filming and all that, editing and whatnot again. And the answer is unlikely. Just because it's just too much of a strain on my family and my personal relationships with friends and all that. I don't get to hang out with people as much anymore unless I'm fishing with them. And yeah, I need to get back home and spend more time with my children. So, but it's been a cool deal, and I'm glad I did it. But yeah, it's been tough, for that reason. I'd like to spend more time with my family, so I probably won't do it again. But I might do other little series things like this in the future. Maybe not for 30 days in a row, though. Advice for fishing in low clarity, poor water condition lakes. I guess I don't have a ton of experience in those situations, but generally what I'm going to be doing is fishing any kind of cover elements I can. So usually in lakes like that, like you're not going to have as much weed growth. But if there's any weeds, like that's awesome. Or fishing around rocks, or if there happens to be cribs. I mean, that's always a bonus. But trying to find cover elements is always good. I like to fish in more like shallow water in those situations, and then oftentimes the bite windows for lakes like that are going to be the exact opposite of sort of these clearer waters. So if you're fishing in a dirty body of water like that, like maybe the best bite is from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock or something, or maybe like 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock, or probably spending all day out there and trying to figure out when the fish like to bite on that particular lake. Recommendation for a flasher for someone who is just getting into ice fishing. My recommendation would be to get something that is not going to burn too big of a hole into your wallet. So if you can get, it depends too, like if you fish during the open water series, like if you have a humminbird or a Lowrance or a Garmin or something like that, and you already have the head unit, like the head unit is most of the cost. So if you can just go and buy an ice transducer or like an ice kit for that particular brand of unit, that would be my biggest recommendation. If I had absolutely nothing and I was starting from scratch, just because I have a lot of experience with them already, but then I wouldn't be starting from scratch. But I would probably get like a Helix 5 or a 7 or something like that. And the reason why is because I know I could take that unit and put it into my boat, and I could do double duty and get open water and ice fishing utility out of a unit. And like they're somewhat inexpensive as far as electronics go. And another nice thing is that you can put lake map chips into them as well. So my recommendation, I guess, at the end of the day, would be doing something that you can put in your boat too. Mav, Nick, Murda, and Sobe in a video would be fire. That would be an experience. And yeah, I don't know, might as well throw anybody else we can in there too. Maybe we should do that at the ice fishing extravaganza. Sorry, can't talk and read at the same time. Yeah, so there was a comment just talking about the Facebook groups and how people are bragging and other people like to hate on others and all those things. And there's a lot of toxicity on social media, in case you didn't notice. And the best answer is, if you wouldn't say it to their face, then don't say it online. And a step further is, if it's mean, just don't say it. Like, there's no reason to be mean. Like, why are you being mean? Is it because you had a bad day? Or because you're angry? Or what's the answer? I think, to me, that's what it kind of comes down to. So just be a nice person, whether it's in person or on social media. Okay, so Chad asked what was wrong with my heater, and he said that he can hear it now. So I actually have a different heater right now. I can show it to you real quick. Hopefully I don't mess things up. So I got one of there it is. One of these trusty heaters that you put on top of right on top of the propane tank, and those ones are just insanely reliable, and they start like every single time, and they're a little bit smaller and easier to deal with, but as you can probably hear, they're also a little bit louder as well, which is not great when you're filming. And what is wrong with my heater? I don't know. I need to investigate that further, but I've just been like running around like crazy without stopping, and haven't really had time to check that out and figure out what's wrong with it. And I think I have theories that what is wrong is maybe like condensation in the hose or something, because I've been kind of treating my gear like crap lately. I've just been leaving it outside in my truck at night and bringing it into like fish houses where there's, a bunch of moisture, and then leaving it outside to freeze. And yeah, it's been, I don't really know. I got to figure that out soon. My brother-in-law said he might look at it for me while I'm fishing, so maybe I'll know tonight. I don't know. Do you use a CO2 alarm in your hub house? Usually, unless I forget it or the battery died or something, I'm typically using a CO2 alarm. They claim that those Mr. Buddies are indoor safe, so they actually should be fine, in theory. Sorry, text came in. I get distracted when people message me. What was I saying? Oh, they should be fine, but like you also really should use an alarm, because even though it should be fine, doesn't mean you shouldn't put your safety first and spend a little bit of extra money on an alarm. Yes, I'm actually fishing for a month. And it sounds brutal. Well, the fishing part is fun, and actually it can be a grind sometimes depending on the conditions, and if I have to walk everywhere and pull my stuff around and film. And yes, it has been a little bit of a grind, but all in all, I can't complain about the fishing part. It's just all the other parts that are a pain in the butt. Do I own a wheelhouse? And if so, where am I taking my first trip this season? I do not own a wheelhouse. If I did, I would have taken it up to Red Lake. I think they're maybe allowing wheelhouses up there right now, probably. Or no, I shouldn't say that, because I hung out with a buddy in a wheelhouse for a little tiny bit when I was up there earlier this year. So yes, they are. I don't know if they're letting out like the biggest wheelhouses yet, but the small ones have definitely been out for a while. So that's why I would have taken it, just because that's the first place you can take it. So okay, so it looks like maybe there was confusion about the automatic hook setting stuff that I was talking about earlier. Automatic hook setting devices are good because they don't allow the fish to eat the bait deep down in their throat or swallow the bait. So it sets the hook before they can swallow it. So it decreases mortality quite a bit. Jawjackers, automatic fishermen, that kind of stuff. Stocked trout with tip-ups is brutal. Jawjackers are great, yes. They like to drop the bait, so. And you guys, you don't have to drop the questions in there multiple times, because I'm literally just scrolling from the top all the way down. I think maybe eventually I'll catch up, but I haven't caught up yet. And if you ask the question a bunch of times, that just means I have to read it again. And, yeah. I will eventually see your questions, don't worry. Okay, how do you feel about keeping 5 12-inch crappies versus keeping 25 10-inchers? I think it's probably better to keep 5 12-inch crappies. If you're just talking about like the amount of meat that you get, you're going to get a lot more meat from a 12-incher than a 10-incher. And I shouldn't say every single, but a lot of those 10-inchers that you're keeping could have been 12-inchers next year. So you're kind of like robbing from your 401k there if you're keeping like a bunch of those smaller ones, especially with different species of fish, it doesn't matter, but with crappies specifically, they're so cyclical. And if you have, they don't have successful hatches every single year, successful spawns, I should say. So when they do have a successful spawn, you get this year class of fish that comes up, and some lakes you'll fish it, and it's like, wow, every single fish in here is 8 inches, and that's because they had a really good successful spawn, like X number of years ago, a handful of years ago. And if you are taking a bunch of fish out of a certain population of crappies, then eventually you're not going to have, eventually you're going to decimate that year class of fish. So my recommendation would be to keep less, but keep fish that are maybe a little bit bigger. But I'm really not a big fan of keeping fish over 12 inches. But that being said, if you're, we're talking crappies right now. If you're fishing for basin crappies, depending on the depth that you're fishing them in, they might be dead fish anyway. But if you're fishing in the shallow weeds like we're in right now, I mean, let some of those bigger fish go, because someone else might run into that fish again in a couple of years, and it might be a 15-incher, which is just a really fun experience. So how does one find good perch sloughs in North Dakota? That's a really good question. My advice would be to have friends who live in North Dakota. Otherwise, if you live there and you have the time to go check all the different sloughs and figure out where the fish are, then just go fish them. It's kind of like fishing bluegill lakes here in Minnesota, where there's several bluegill lakes that, may potentially be good, but, due to fishing pressure, like, populations might get decimated, but then they're going to recover in a few years. And it's just one of those things. Like in Minnesota, like there could be, I might have 20 plus lakes on my list of potentially good bluegill fisheries, smaller lakes, which would be like the equivalent of your slough in the Dakotas. And to figure out if the fish are there and if the fishing is good, like you just gotta go there and fish. So I guess my recommendation would be just going to as many sloughs as you can and fishing them, and maybe asking around a little bit, see if you can get some local information about what some of the decent sloughs have been traditionally, and just kind of reading online and looking around. And a really good thing is actually going on Google Maps, where you can actually see where some of these lakes are, and if they're big enough, then they might have fish in them potentially. And I don't know in the Dakotas if there's public, I mean, there must be public stocking reports and stuff to figure out where these, basically where the Fish and Wildlife are putting fish in there. Because if they're putting fish in there, that means there's going to be fish in there. And with how nutrient rich that area is, like the fish are going to grow really fast. James just bought the Otter Resort. What otter do you have, and do you like it, or would you rather have gone a different hub? So I have the Lodge right now, and like the Lodge, I think is awesome for fishing with one or two people, and it's really good for camping with one person sleeping in here. If you put two people, it's a little tight. So not a fan of it for sleeping more than two people. Just for fishing, I think you could fish like 3 people in here, maybe 4, maybe. It'd be really cramped, but if you had like the kids and the family. But I did want to buy the next size up, and I didn't end up getting the next size up. Who is my favorite fishing YouTuber? I feel like that's a trap. Just kidding. There's kind of a lot of really good ones. So like Aaron Weave is kind of the OG, one of my favorites, but there's a lot of really good people. Some of them have been commenting here in the comment section. I kind of watch all of them, to be honest, and that's my politically correct answer, but there's a lot of people who are making good content these days. I'll say props to my buddy Brett McComas, Target Walleye, because I sometimes help him make his videos. So there's your answer. Just kidding. When is my dad gonna make a guest appearance? That's a good question. I've asked him a couple times if he wants to come fishing. He lives on a little lake, and he said the fishing's been good out there lately, so maybe I'll force him to come out and fish with me if I make it out there by the end of this 30-day challenge. Zachary said I should come to Colorado. Colorado's on my bucket list, especially for early ice. Someone said I should go home. Maybe I should go home. There are fajitas waiting. Dan asked how the battery life is for my Mega Live. I did talk about that earlier, but I ran it all day on a 20 amp hour, and I'm not sure how many hours it goes. I haven't turned on the lighting or anything. Flash bites aren't worth staying late after. I would agree. When it happens, and you go into the night, and it can be over. How much time do you spend digitally pre-fishing or scouting lakes before you drill holes? So choosing which lake you go to before you go there is really critical. There's stocking reports online, and if a lake was stocked with a bunch of fish like 6 years ago, then it might be worth going to check out. So looking at stocking reports is huge, and then just word of mouth from buddies like, hey, I was out over here and it was real good. You should come out sometime and fish, and that can be part of it too. Word of mouth is big, but how much time do I spend? I don't know. I think it's important to know there's fish there before you go there if possible, whether it's stocking reports or just reports from buddies. Danny said I should maybe try the series during January when I can use my sled or wheeler to help pull gear. I think that sounds really appealing. But also, fishing is a little bit better during this early ice period. Morrison's Outdoors says, best wishes with the series, stay safe, and Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you too. What baits do I recommend for walleye fishing through the ice? Okay, small spoon, so like an 1/8 ounce or a 1/4 ounce, I guess just kind of a standard spoon like a buckshot or something. You could use a fluttering spoon. Spoons are great. Walleyes love spoons. And during this early ice period, I think the horizontal glide baits, like the jigging wrap or the puppet minnow, those can be super good too. So that's kind of like a good 1-2 punch for jigging options. And then if you're looking specifically for a something that can kind of save your day, make sure you got the tip ups or the dead sticks set up as well. Frank said I should fish with Jay Siemens. Jay makes extremely good videos. I wouldn't mind fishing with Jay sometime. I don't know when the heck I'm going to go up to Canada next, so that could be an issue too. I'm just so busy down here. It's hard for me to justify going up there. Okay, recommendation for good gloves and clothing. So it's definitely worth getting a, if you're gonna ice fish, like it's worth getting like a suit that floats. Whoa, this does not look good. The lighting is awkward in here. A suit that floats, like I got a striker suit, and then gloves. Like good gloves are important. These are also made by Striker. They're the combat gloves, and what's cool about these is they're waterproof. So sometimes I'll actually go out fishing, and instead of scooping out my hole with an ice scoop, I'll just put my glove on and scoop it all out. So having gloves that are waterproof is really critical in some cases, so your hands aren't getting wet and whatnot. So gloves are huge. Like if I'm gonna spend up on anything, it's gonna be on nice gloves. So, favorite restaurant in Brainerd? Well, you'd think I would have a lot faster answer to this. I'll have to think about that one a little bit more. Nothing's popping. Oh well, you know what's really good is I like Ernie's over on Go Lake. That's probably my go-to. I'm not sure. What's a good size to eat for lake trout? I'm not sure. I haven't kept many lake trout. Any plans to film sturgeon fishing on the ice? No plans, but I really want to do that. Like I'd said earlier in this live video. Favorite area to fish mille lacs in the winter? I go out of Miramar a lot. I kind of the north side and the northwest side just because it's closest to home. Do I ever fish anywhere in Michigan? I've fished Lake St. Clair before. Detroit River, Lake Erie, kind of that whole fishery on either side of the Detroit River. So I fished that a handful of times, actually. Michigan is like really far away, so I haven't made a lot of trips over there, but that's kind of the extent of my experience on Michigan. But Michigan is like, it's gorgeous. Like Michigan's really cool. I want to get back to Michigan a little bit more if I can. If I ever fished with Tom Boley. No, I've never fished with Tom. I have spoken with Tom at length at the St. Paul Ice Show right after he posted some muskie fishing through the ice videos because I was very interested, so I had to ask him about that. But I've never fished with Tom. But you know what? Tom hangs out in my neck of the woods sometimes. So Tom fishes a lot over in Wisconsin where he's from, but he also comes and fishes mille lacs a lot. So maybe I should reach out to Tom when he's in my neck of the woods here at some point. Reading questions again. Sweet. It looks like we're getting to the end here. Maybe I should go home. So Crosby Mine Pits, someone asked about. I fish them. Yes. Not a ton, but the mine pits are cool. Like, it's crazy that they dug holes in the ground that are extremely deep and extremely clear water, and then yeah, basically they dug holes in the ground and put fish in them, and now you can fish in them. So probably, I mean, sometimes the problem with those stock trout lakes is they really get harvested super hard. So it's kind of the same problem that we get with like a lot of our local lakes around here because there's so much fishing pressure. But people like to eat the fish that get put in there, so they don't get super huge. But you can catch some nice ones in there as well, and it's really cool. Ultra clear water. Cool. Well, I think we are at the end of the line here. Oh, well, maybe if you put the question right now, you might be able to sneak in a couple questions. Maybe, possibly, or I'll just shut it down. Best time of year to fish the mine bits. I like to fish them. Well, if you're talking in the winter specifically, I like to fish them as soon as trout opens because you want to. Oh, here comes the comments. uh, you want to fish them as soon as possible because you want to get there before like a lot of those fish get eaten or before a lot of those fish have seen a lot of lures too. Just fishing pressure is something you want to avoid. But open water, you can go out and catch like a bunch of them. I would love to take Mega Live out there and scan it around and find fish and cast them. I don't know. I feel like Mega Live plus bobbers would be really, really good potentially for those trout. So I don't know. Open water's a cool time to do it too. Brian said he's on Red Lake right now doing good. There you go. Run up there, guys. No, Red Lake is kind of fascinating because people get up there as fast as they can and fish it, and they get they want to be the first people out there, but at that point in time the water is still actually kind of dirty, and some of the best fishing is actually later in the year. So sometimes like the Red Lake can be a post-hype sleeper where it's actually better later after people are done hyping it up. Right about the time that people are starting to put wheelhouses is when it can be the best. Seeing if there's anything else here before I shut things down. Someone said if I wanted to add Derek said if I wanted to add a chef component to the show he's in. He said he's a pro chef. Sounds good to me. If someone's real good at cooking fish, I'll definitely get in on that. Go eat. James says I have to go. Cool. I'd love to get out to South Dakota too. Tell us how the fajitas are. Should I leave this live video on for 30 minutes while I drive home? And actually, it's going to be more than that because I got to pack things up. Yeah, probably 15 minutes. Well, 20 minutes because I got to pack it up, throw it in the sled, drag it back up to the car, and get it loaded up in the car, and then drive home, which is going to take 30 minutes. I'll probably be home in an hour. So maybe I'll talk to you for another hour in my car, and then I'll get home, take a bite of the fajita, and let you know it's good. Or I could just tell you right now that I know it's going to be tasty because I'm delicious. Because I'm extremely hungry. So anything that I eat is going to be delicious right now. Okay, if the walleyes are getting spooked while you're aggressively jigging, any tips? Maybe potentially downsizing was the question. And yes, downsizing can be really good. Sometimes the answer might just be, okay, so here's a fun trick. If you're having fish that are just super not in a good mood and you can't figure out how to get them to bite, sometimes you can just kind of jig, maybe a foot or two or a couple feet off the bottom. It depends on the lake you're fishing and whatnot, or how high the fish are coming in on. But if they're coming in like right on the bottom and they're real slow and they don't want to bite and they kind of just leave, one thing that you can do is, let's say you're using like a spoon or something, just drop that spoon down on the bottom. And as long as it's not mud and it's like buried in the mud, if it's like hard bottom and the fish is able to like pick it up off the bottom, that can be like a really good trick for getting finicky fish to bite. And one thing that's really key if you do that is dropping it on the bottom and having it just sit there, but making sure that your line is still tight so that you could feel the thump. That can be kind of important too, because if you can't feel the bite, then that kind of sucks. So make sure it's not like a slack line, make sure it's tight, but just drop your bait on the bottom, let it sit there. And the biggest answer really is just to like mix it up and try different things, because you never quite know what the answer is going to be on that particular day or on that lake or with those walleyes that come through. But if you experiment with different things, eventually you'll find out what's working. Am I planning on using the old flasher this season or only using live? To be determined. I haven't figured that out yet. I think I like to roll with Mega Live mostly because I think it looks way cooler for video, and I think you guys get a cooler viewing experience. So I will probably stick with it for the most part. But I have been toying with the idea of using a traditional flasher and fishing with it and recording on it and kind of just giving like advice and tips on it. So I think I'd like to do that at some point. More pike videos. I'd like to do pike videos. I don't target pike a lot, but there is a lake that I heard has some good pike fishing, so I may do some pike fishing later in the season, possibly. And if I do, I'll film it and show it to you guys. Alright. Well, I think I'm going to call it here. This actually looks better for lighting instead of like tipping it up. Anyway, so now I'm getting off subject, but I want to thank all you guys for watching to the end here. Oh, did I get one more question? How easy is it to convert a Mega Live from the boat to winter? So I haven't done it before because I just got this live unit. My understanding is that it's not terribly difficult. So there's some wiring situations that you got to figure out, and you know, get the cord on your, well, it depends on where you're putting it too, like if you're putting it on your trolling motor or what you're doing, but I don't think it would be terribly difficult. So yeah, I mean, just I would I would plan on using it in the winter and in the summer. If you're gonna invest, okay, now it's just shaky. I should just set it down for one more minute here. If you're gonna invest like that much money into some fishing technology, like you should definitely plan on using it in open water and ice fishing. Like, why not, right? So, yes. The answer is yes. No, it's I've heard it's not bad. So yeah, that's, but you know, go online, look it up. It shouldn't be hard. Okay, so Joe asked about fishing lakes that have steep drops. He asked if it's better to fish on the top or the bottom, and I guess my answer is going to be the answer that I would probably give for like a lot of different situations, and it's like, try it. So if you're not a hole hopper, okay, so if you are a hole hopper or you like to use dead sticks or tip ups or anything, like fish on the bottom of the break and set a tip up on the top of the break, or vice versa, and you'll find out pretty quick. You know, you could find out in one day, but you know, if you just have one line and you just want to fish one line, like one day set up on the bottom of the break, the other day set up on the top of the break, and you know, you'll kind of figure it out. It's just trial and error, and you kind of gotta decide just based on your experience what the best strategy is going to be, and it's going to be different on different lakes. So yeah, anyway, I'm kind of bummed that we didn't catch any more fish, but that's, you know, like we said kind of earlier in the comments as well, that sometimes when that flash bite happens, the night bite can be sort of difficult later in the day. So anywho, I am gonna wrap this thing up here. So am I supposed to do some like fancy intro or outro like I do in my other videos? And I also got to figure out before this thing is said and done how to turn off this live video. But thanks for joining me on the live video here. I feel like this turnout has been surprisingly good, and hopefully you guys got some value out of it, because that's the main reason why I do it, is just to put some good help out into the fishing world, and you know, hopefully you guys enjoy it, and yeah, hopefully there was some value here and it was helpful. But I don't think there's any more questions. There's just some people saying thanks and later. But yeah, awesome. Thank you for watching so much. I do appreciate it so much. And there's going to be a normal video tomorrow. The video that's coming out tomorrow is the video that was shot yesterday, I think. So anyway, that's going to be the last day fishing out in the Devil's Lake area. And that video has my wife in it. And sorry, reading the last comments coming in. That video has my wife in it, so it's going to be the best video yet because she was there for the whole thing. And spoiler alert, but she ended up kicking my butt naturally. So anywho, I'm going to close this thing down, and thank you all for watching this video, and we will see you tomorrow.